in the small, sun-kissed town of Valverde, where the hills rolled into the distance like green waves and the air smelled of citrus and wildflowers. There lived two families whose histories were steeped in rivalry. The Montelucas and the Castagnis had feuded for generations, a bitter rivalry that neither side could fully remember the origin of, but both families held dear. Among the Montelucas, there was a young woman named Isabella, a beauty whose dark eyes sparkled like stars in the midnight sky, and whose heart was both tender and fierce. She spent her days painting, wandering the flower-drenched hillsides, and dreaming of a love beyond the constraints of her family's expectations. She had heard of the Castagnis only through whispered words of hatred, but nothing in her quiet, sheltered life had prepared her for the day she first laid eyes on Lucien Castagni. It was at a festival in the town square, one of those rare nights when the air was thick with music and the people's laughter echoed in the streets. Isabella had slipped away from the festivities, seeking a moment of solitude by the river that wound through the town, its water sparkling like liquid silver under the moonlight. And it was there in the shadows of the ancient stone bridge that she saw him. Lucien stood with his back to her, gazing out over the river, his broad shoulders illuminated by the faint glow of the lanterns that lined the walkway. He looked every bit the son of the Castagni patriarch, handsome, composed, yet with an air of melancholy that seemed to permeate his very being. Isabella's heart skipped a beat, and for a moment, she thought she might be imagining the pull she felt toward him. But as she stepped forward, a stray branch cracked beneath her foot. Lucien turned. Their eyes met, and time itself seemed to pause. "Forgive me," he said, his voice a low, rich sound. "I didn't mean to startle you." Isabella, startled and breathless, could hardly find her voice. "No, it's not your fault," she whispered, almost instinctively, though she was well aware of the tension between their families. Yet in that moment, it was as if the world beyond the river ceased to exist. They stood there for a long moment, neither speaking, both captivated by the quiet intensity of the other's presence. "I'm Lucien," he said, taking a step closer, though still keeping a respectful distance. "Isabella," she replied softly, her heart pounding in her chest, unsure if she should flee or stay. "Monteluca." His gaze darkened for the briefest of moments, but it was fleeting. His eyes softened again, a small, hesitant smile forming at the corner of his lips. "I know." The two families had been enemies for as long as anyone could remember. Their fathers had built their legacies on this very feud, each taking great pride in their bitter rivalry. Yet here, under the soft glow of the moon, nothing seemed to matter, neither the centuries of hatred, nor the promises of loyalty that bound them to their bloodlines. "You should go," Isabella whispered, the thought of their families discovering them together making her heart race with panic. "It's dangerous for us to be seen." Lucien nodded slowly, his expression serious, though his eyes never left hers. "I know, but I can't help but wonder." He paused as if searching for the right words. "What if the hatred they hold isn't our own? What if it's a shadow we've inherited?" Isabella bit her lip, her thoughts a tangled mess. "It doesn't matter. We don't control what they feel. Only what we do." Lucien's face hardened for a moment, but then he reached into his coat and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. "If you will allow me, I would like to write to you. Just once, so that we might know each other outside the confines of this war our families have waged." Isabella hesitated. The danger of their situation loomed large in her mind, but something inside her, the longing for connection, for a love untainted by the bitterness of the world around them, compelled her to nod.